8 years after a night with her, CEO spots a girl bearing his mark. Could this be my daughter? Hi, my most adored, most honored, and most deeply loved family. How are you today, my heartbeat? This is your Mr. Peter, and today I come before you not just as a storyteller, but as a son, a soul full of emotion and a voice carrying deep, endless love. Today is not just a day, it's a sacred moment to celebrate the women who gave us life, held us through storms, and loved us even when we felt unlovable. To every beautiful mother in this family, I say from the deepest part of my being, Happy Mother's Day. You are a living miracle. You are God's most tender creation. But today also brings tears to my eyes, because 2 years ago, I lost the most precious soul I've ever known, my mother. She didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to hold her hand. One call, and she was gone forever. She gave me her strength when I was weak. Her prayers built my dreams. Her love was the blanket that kept me going in the coldest nights of my life. I still whisper, "I love you, Mama," into the silence, hoping somehow she hears me in heaven. I miss her more than words can say. So today, I tell you, my family, if your mother is still here, hold her, thank her, and love her like never before. A prayer as soft and powerful as a mother's heart. May every mother be lifted high in love today. May your heart be filled with joy that never fades, and may peace rest gently in your soul. I pray that every sacrifice you've made returns to you in overflowing blessings. May your name be honored, your hands be held in gratitude, and your soul feel the warmth of deep appreciation. May God shine favor upon you and surround you with the love you so freely give. You are not just mothers, you are the heartbeat of heaven on earth. To all the incredible mothers in this family, you are my inspiration, my honor, my endless respect. Let's reach 1,000 likes on this video to show our love. And today, please, from my heart, promise me you'll bring at least one friend to join our family, to feel this love, to witness this beautiful story. Tell me in the comments, did you receive a Mother's Day gift today? And what gift would you love to receive from me, your Mr. Peter? I'm listening with all my heart. Please like, comment, and share. And to all mothers, happy, blessed, unforgettable Mother's Day. You are forever loved. Let's begin with honor, with love, and with the memory of the woman who gave me everything. The night screamed with unholy fury. Rain lashed against Clark Dawson's windshield like 1,000 liquid bullets, each drop exploding into silver shrapnel before being swept away by the overwhelmed wipers. The sky above writhed in agony, purple-black. Clouds twisting into monstrous shapes that belonged in nightmares, not in the Mississippi countryside. Each flash of lightning revealed a landscape transformed. What had been a simple country road just hours ago was now a hellscape of rushing water and fallen branches. Clark's knuckles had gone white against the steering wheel, his fingers aching from the death grip he'd maintained for the past 20 minutes. His Armani suit, which had seemed so important this morning in the Memphis boardroom, now felt like a costume from another life entirely. The GPS screen flickered once, twice, then died with a pathetic electronic whimper, leaving him alone in the darkness with only the storm's rage for company. Thunder crashed so close that his teeth rattled, the sound not just heard, but felt. A physical force that vibrated through his bones, like the earth itself was screaming. His headlights carved twin tunnels through the liquid darkness, revealing nothing but more water, more chaos, more isolation. Then he saw it, a distant amber glow that promised salvation. A cottage, small and weathered, standing like a lighthouse. Against the storm's fury, hope flared in his chest, but the mud-slicked road had other plans. His front wheel hit a deep rut filled with rushing water, and suddenly the world tilted sideways. Time stretched like molten glass. Clark felt the sickening sensation of weightlessness as his Mercedes began its violent ballet. The windshield spiderwebbed, then shattered inward, letting in the storm's fury. Metal screamed against earth. His head struck the side pillar hard enough to see stars, and his vision blurred as the car finally came to rest on its side. When the world stopped spinning, Clark hung suspended by his seatbelt, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead onto the leather roof below. Rain poured through the broken windows, already beginning to pool around his hanging head. With trembling fingers, he fumbled for the seatbelt release. The drop was only 3 feet, but in his dazed state, it felt like falling from a cliff. He crawled through the shattered passenger window, glass crunching beneath his palms, leaving bloody handprints on the twisted metal. The storm attacked immediately, driving rain like ice needles into his exposed skin. His Italian leather shoes slipped in the thick mud as he struggled to his feet, nearly sending him sprawling. The cottage beckoned through the tempest, its windows glowing with warm light that seemed impossible in this nightmare landscape. Each step toward it was a battle against wind that felt almost sentient in its malevolence. His clothes were plastered to his body within seconds, the cold seeping into his bones until his whole body shook uncontrollably. By the time he reached the small covered porch, Clark could barely stand. His fist pounded against the weathered wooden door, weak, desperate thumps that seemed pathetic against the storm's roar. "Please," he gasped, though he knew no one could hear him. "God, someone, anyone." The door swung open, and Clark found himself looking into the most extraordinary eyes he'd ever seen. They were the color of rich coffee, flecked with gold that caught the lamplight from inside, framed by long lashes and set in a face that made him momentarily forget his dire circumstances. The woman standing there wore paint-splattered overalls. Over a flannel shirt, her natural hair pulled back in a loose bun that left tendrils framing her face. A streak of cobalt blue paint decorated her left cheek like war paint. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the broken businessman and the artist, separated by more than just a threshold. "Jesus," she breathed, her voice carrying the soft cadence of the Deep South. Without hesitation, she grabbed his arm and pulled him inside. "You look like death itself came calling." The warmth hit him like a physical force, making him sway on his feet. Clark's legs gave out, and he would have crumpled to the floor if she hadn't caught him, surprisingly strong for her petite frame. "Easy there," she murmured, guiding him to a chair by the fireplace. "I got you. You're safe now." The cottage interior was like stepping into another world entirely. Every wall was covered with paintings, some finished, some just beginning. Easels stood like sentinels throughout the space, holding canvases in various stages of completion. The air smelled of oil paint, turpentine, and something else, cinnamon and vanilla, like Christmas cookies baking. "I'm Bobby," she said, already moving with practiced efficiency, gathering towels and blankets. "Bobby Mangum, and you're about 2 minutes from hypothermia if we don't get you warm quick." "See, Clark," he managed through chattering teeth. "My car. The storm." "I saw," she said simply, kneeling to pull off his waterlogged shoes. "Heard. It too sounded like the world ending out there." Her hands were gentle as she wrapped a towel around his shoulders, then another before draping a heavy quilt over everything. There was something innately maternal in her efficiency, though she couldn't have been older than 25, several years younger than him. "We need to get these wet clothes off you," she said matter-of-factly. But Clark caught the slight blush that darkened her cheeks. "I'll find something dry." She disappeared into another room, leaving Clark to shiver by the fire. He looked around properly for the first time, taking in the organized chaos of an artist's life. Her paintings were extraordinary, abstract pieces that somehow captured pure emotion in brushstrokes. One series along the far wall showed storms, in various stages, from brewing clouds to full fury, each one more intense than the last. Bobby returned with clothes. Men's clothes he noticed with an unexpected twinge of something he didn't want to examine. My brother's, she explained, reading his expression accurately. He visits sometimes, thinks I'm crazy living out here alone. Maybe he's right, Clark said, attempting levity despite his shivering. A night like this is exactly why I live here, she countered, her eyes flashing with passion. You see that storm? That's raw power, pure creation and destruction dancing together. I can't capture that from some sterile city apartment. She turned her back while he changed, busying herself with stoking the fire. Clark stripped off his wet clothes with numb fingers, grateful for the privacy and the warm, dry flannel against his skin. Better? She asked when he was done. Much. Thank you. He paused, suddenly overwhelmed by what had just happened. You saved my life. Bobby shrugged, but her eyes were warm as she settled beside him on the floor, pulling a thick quilt around both their shoulders without asking. The fire crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside this small space, peace reigned. Tell me something, Bobby said after a comfortable silence had stretched between them. What's a man in a $1,000 suit doing on a back road in the middle of nowhere during the worst storm in a decade? Clark laughed, surprising himself. Would you believe I was taking a shortcut? From where to where? Memphis to Atlanta. Big presentation. Tomorrow. Supposed to be there tonight. He shook his head ruefully. Shows what I know about shortcuts. Well, she said, eyes twinkling with mischief, I don't think you're making that meeting. No, he agreed, finding himself oddly unbothered by this fact. I don't suppose I am. They fell into easy conversation as naturally as breathing. She told him about her art, how she'd inherited the cottage from her grandmother, how she made just enough selling paintings to survive, but wouldn't trade this life for anything. He found himself opening up in ways he never did, telling her things he'd never told anyone about the emptiness he felt in boardrooms, how success hadn't brought the satisfaction he'd expected, about the engagement to Victoria that had ended 6 months ago because he couldn't give her the emotional availability she deserved. You know what your problem is, Bobby said after he'd finished, her voice gentle but direct. What's that? You've forgotten how to feel. Everything's a transaction. For you, a deal to be made. But life, real life, it's messy and unpredictable and beautiful. Like that storm out there. As if to emphasize her point, lightning flashed brilliant white, illuminating her face for a heart-stopping moment. In that instant, Clark saw something he'd been missing. His entire life, authenticity, passion, a soul unafraid of its own power. Maybe you're right, he said softly, his voice barely audible over the rain. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and something electric passed between them, not unlike the lightning outside, but infinitely more dangerous. Clark became hyper-aware of her presence, the way firelight played across her dark skin, the paint stains on her fingers that spoke of creation, the way she smelled of turpentine and jasmine and possibility itself. Bobby, he said, not knowing what he wanted to say, only that her name felt necessary on his lips. She leaned forward slightly, drawn by the same magnetic pull he felt. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, and he could see the rapid pulse, beating at the base of her throat, matching the thundering of his own heart. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable as the storm itself, soft at first, a question asked in the language of lips and breath. Her mouth was warm, tasting faintly of chamomile tea and honey. The second kiss was an answer, deeper and more certain, filled with the kind of hunger that comes from recognition, two souls finding their match. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing hard, eyes wide with wonder and something that might have been fear at the intensity of what had just passed between them. Clark, she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. He touched her face with reverent fingers, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek, memorizing the feeling of her skin. In 32 years of living, he'd never felt anything like this sense of rightness, of coming home to a place he'd never been. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside their own private universe, everything had gone still, poised on the edge of something irreversible. They both knew what came next, felt it in the air between them like electricity before lightning strikes. And like lightning, what happened next would leave them both forever changed, marked by a night when fate and weather conspired to bring two souls together in the most unlikely of circumstances. Chapter 2. Before the dawn. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting dancing shadows across the cottage walls like ancient spirits, bearing witness to what had transpired. Outside, the storm's fury had gentled into a steady rhythm, nature's own symphony playing. Just for them, Clark held Bobby close against his chest, her head nestled perfectly in the hollow beneath his chin, her fingers tracing invisible patterns across his skin. They lay entwined on the pile of quilts she'd pulled from a cedar chest, the firelight painting their bodies in shades of gold and amber. Time seemed suspended, existing only in the space between their shared breaths. "Tell me about this one," he whispered, gesturing toward a large canvas dominating the far wall, an explosion of purple and silver that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "That's Midnight Revelation," she murmured, her voice still husky from their lovemaking. "Painted it last summer during another storm. Couldn't sleep, so I just let the brush follow the lightning." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, her hair creating a curtain around them. "Sometimes the best art comes when you stop trying to control everything." "It's alive," Clark said, genuinely amazed by the way the painting seemed to move in the flickering light. "How do you capture that? That exact moment when everything changes?" She studied him with those extraordinary eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You just have to be willing to let go. Control is the enemy of art." Her finger traced a line down his chest, probably the enemy of life too. He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his heart. "Is that what this is? Letting go? Isn't it?" The question floated between them like smoke from the dying fire. Clark knew he should feel guilty. Tomorrow he would return to Atlanta, to board meetings and spreadsheets and carefully controlled interactions. But lying here with her, listening to the rain's steady percussion on the roof and feeling more at peace than he had in years, guilt was a foreign concept. "I've never done anything like this before," he admitted quietly. "What? Crashed your car in a storm? You know what I mean." He turned to face her fully, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "This, being with someone I just met, feeling like what? Like I've known you forever, like this cottage, this moment, you, all of it is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Her breath caught, and he saw something flicker in her eyes, hope mixed with caution. "Clark, I know." He pressed his forehead against hers. "I know it sounds crazy. A few hours ago I didn't even know you existed. But Bobby, I feel more myself right now than I have in years." She was quiet for a long moment, then sat up, reaching for his abandoned shirt. The fabric fell around her like a tent, the sleeves swallowing her hands. She looked impossibly young suddenly, vulnerable in a way that made his chest tight. "I should probably tell you something," she said, not meeting his eyes. "What's that?" This isn't who I am either. I don't bring strangers home, I don't." She gestured helplessly at the rumpled quilts, at their state of undress, at the intimate cocoon they'd created. "But when I opened that door and saw you standing there, soaked and bleeding and looking so lost, something inside me just knew. What? That you were important, that this night was important." She finally looked at him, tears gathering in her eyes. "That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?" "No." He sat up too, pulling her into his arms. "No, it doesn't sound ridiculous at all. They held each other as the fire crackled its last gasps, as the storm gradually softened from rage to whisper, as the night deepened toward its inevitable end. Clark felt something fundamental shifting inside him, tectonic plates realigning in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. "Come with me," Bobby said suddenly, taking his hand. "Where?" "Trust me." She led him through the cottage, past canvases in various stages of completion, through a kitchen that smelled of herbs and possibility, to a small sunroom at the back. The storm pressed against the glass walls, but inside their sanctuary remained, warm and dry. An easel stood in the center, holding a canvas covered by a paint-stained cloth. "I've been working on something," she said, suddenly shy. "Haven't shown anyone yet. It's not finished, but..." She pulled away the cloth, revealing a painting that stole his breath. It was a heart, not the Valentine's Day variety, but an anatomically inspired abstract, painted in deep crimsons and purples. But within the chambers and vessels she'd woven stories, tiny landscapes, fragments of faces, moments captured in brushstrokes so fine they seemed impossible. Each ventricle held a different world, all connected by veins of silver and gold. "It's about connection," she explained, her voice soft. "About how we carry pieces of everyone we've ever loved inside us. How every encounter changes us at a cellular level. How we're all walking around with these invisible ties binding us to each other." Clark stared at the painting, feeling something crack open in his chest. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You don't have to say that. I'm not." He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "Bobby, I mean it. You see things, feel things that most people miss entirely. You're extraordinary." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Don't. What? Don't say things you can't mean. Don't make this more than it is. What if it already is more? It can't be." Her voice broke. "Tomorrow the storm will pass and you'll go back to your world and I'll go back to mine. That's how these things work. That's what mourning is for, to remind us who we really are. And who are we? You're a businessman from Atlanta who took a wrong turn. I'm an artist who lives alone in the woods. We're a story that ends at sunrise." He wanted to argue, to make promises he wasn't sure he could keep, but something in her voice told him she'd been hurt before, had believed in forever, only to find it as temporary as summer rain. So instead, he pulled her close and kissed her, soft and deep and full of all the words he couldn't say. They made love again there in the sunroom, surrounded by her art and the gradually gentling storm. It was different this time, slower, suffused with the bittersweet awareness that dawn was approaching. Every touch felt like a goodbye, every kiss a futile attempt to stop time. Later, back by the dying fire, they lay wrapped in each other and quilts, not speaking. The storm had finally exhausted itself, settling into a steady patter that sounded like tears on the roof. "Bobby? What if I didn't want to go back?" The silence stretched so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, barely audible, "Everyone goes back, Clark. That's the rule. You wake up and you remember who you are and you go back to real life." "This feels pretty real to me." "That's because it's still dark. Everything feels possible in the dark. But morning always comes." He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that some connections transcended circumstance. But her voice carried the weight of experience, and he realized he wasn't the first man to make promises in the dark, to speak of forever while wrapped in the aftermath of passion. "Bobby, Shh." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't turn this perfect night into something that will hurt later. Just be here with me. Let this be what it is." "And what is it?" "Perfect," she whispered. "Complete. A story with a beginning, middle, and end. No messy afterward, no broken promises, no slow fade into disappointment. Just this." He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "You've been hurt before, haven't we all? Is That why you live out here alone, hiding from the world? I'm not hiding, I'm choosing. There's a difference. She turned in his arms to face him. I'd rather have one perfect night than a lifetime of almosts. The words hit him like a physical blow. Bobby, promise me something. Anything. When you leave. She paused, seeming to gather courage. When you leave, don't look back. Don't call. Don't try to find me. Don't turn this into something ordinary with awkward phone calls and failed attempts at long distance. Just take this perfect night and keep it whole. He felt his heart breaking for something that hadn't even ended yet. You're asking me to walk away and never... I'm asking you to preserve this, to keep it perfect. Her eyes were fierce now, desperate. Promise me, Clark, promise me you'll let this end clean. He saw the fear there, not of him leaving, but of him trying to stay, of this magical night being diluted by reality, diminished by distance, destroyed by the inevitable disappointment when perfect gave way to mundane. I promise, he said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. She smiled then, sad and beautiful in the dying firelight. Thank you. They held each other as the night waned, neither sleeping. Clark tried to memorize everything, the weight of her in his arms, the sound of her breathing, the way she smelled of paint and rain and home. He stored up sense memories like a drowning man storing oxygen, knowing morning would come too soon. The first pale light of dawn crept through the windows like an unwelcome guest, turning everything gray and uncertain. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world washed clean and somehow diminished. Birds began their tentative morning songs, each note a countdown to goodbye. It stopped raining, Bobby said unnecessarily. Yeah, neither moved. Outside, the world was waking up, preparing to resume its ordinary rotations. Inside their cocoon, they clung to the last moments of extraordinary. Clark? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For crashing into my life. For reminding me that magic still exists. For being exactly who you are, exactly when I needed it. He closed his eyes against the tears that threatened. Bobby, no. She sat up, pulling away gently but firmly. No more words. It's morning. And just like that, the spell was broken. The cottage that had been their private universe became just a room again. The storm that had brought them together was just weather now, its passion spent. Clark watched her move away, watched the walls go up behind her eyes, watched her transform back into the stranger he'd met just hours ago. The artist who lived alone in the woods, the woman who preferred perfect endings to messy possibilities. The sun rose higher, painting the cottage in shades of gold and pink and ordinary daylight. The storm had passed. Morning had come. And Clark understood with devastating clarity that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones that end. Chapter 3. The Art of Leaving. The morning arrived with cruel indifference, painting the world in shades of grey and silver. Clark opened his eyes to find the cottage transformed by dawn's honest light. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world that seemed almost embarrassed by its previous fury. Through the window, he could see his Mercedes lying on its side in the ditch, a metal carcass marking where one life had ended, and something else, something impossible to name, had begun. Beside him, Bobby slept with the absolute peace of someone who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. Her face in repose was a masterpiece no artist could capture. The curve of her cheek catching the early light, her lashes casting delicate shadows, her lips slightly parted as if waiting for one last kiss he couldn't give. But he didn't wake. Her couldn't. Instead, Clark slipped from beneath the quilts with the practiced stealth of a coward choosing flight over fight. The floorboards creaked a soft protest under his feet as he gathered his clothes, still damp, reeking of rain and mud and disaster. He dressed in the small bathroom, avoiding his reflection in the spotted mirror. He didn't want to see what kind of man stared back, the kind who could walk away from something this profound, this real. The living room felt different in daylight, smaller somehow, more ordinary. But her paintings still commanded attention, especially the Storm series that had captured his attraction even before he knew the artist. Now, understanding the passion behind each brushstroke, they seemed to pulse with life, with memory, with everything he was about to lose. He found himself standing before her heart, painting again, the one with lives woven into its chambers. In the morning light, he noticed details missed in the darkness, tiny figures reaching for each other across anatomical divides, moments of connection painted so delicately they looked more like prayers than pigments. "Take this perfect night and keep it whole," she had begged him. "Don't let the world tarnish it." Clark pulled out his wallet with hands that trembled slightly. The cash inside, nearly $3,000 from the client dinner he'd attended in Memphis, felt simultaneously too much and pathetically inadequate. No amount could capture what had happened here, what she'd given him, but leaving nothing felt worse somehow, like negating the entire experience. He found a small canvas bag hanging by the door, the kind artists used for supplies, and tucked the money inside. His throat tightened as he searched for paper and pen. On her cluttered desk, surrounded by sketches and half-finished poems written in her distinctive flowing script, the blank page mocked him with its emptiness. What words could possibly bridge the chasm between what had happened and what had to happen next? He wrote and crossed out a dozen beginnings. "Bobby, last night was everything I never knew I needed. I wish things could be different, if circumstances were otherwise. You've changed me in ways I don't yet understand." Each attempt felt more inadequate than the last, too small for the enormity of what they'd shared, too large for the simplicity she'd asked him to maintain. In the end, he wrote simply, "For supplies and repairs from the storm damage, you saved my life." See, the words were cowardly and insufficient and all wrong. They reduced transcendence to transaction, magic to mundane. But they were also safe, maintaining the fiction she seemed to need, that this had been about shelter from a storm, nothing more. He placed the note atop the money and set the bag prominently on the kitchen table where she couldn't miss it. Then he stood there, paralyzed by the weight of what came next. Every instinct screamed at him to go back to the bedroom, to wake her with kisses, to beg her to reconsider her rules about perfect endings. Through the doorway, he could see the rumpled quilts that still held the shape of their bodies, the dying embers of a fire that had burned so bright. The cottage held their story in every corner, in the wine glasses abandoned on the mantel, in the puddle of his ruined clothes by the door, in the very air that still carried the scent of jasmine and paint and passion. Clark took one step toward the bedroom, then stopped. She had extracted a promise from him, and breaking it now would turn him into every man who had ever disappointed her, every fool who couldn't honor the sanctity of a perfect moment. He looked one last time around the cottage that had been their entire universe for a handful of hours, at her paintings that revealed a soul too beautiful for the ordinary world, at the cold fireplace that had witnessed confessions and revelations, at the quilts that had wrapped them in their own private storm. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the morning. The world outside was impossibly beautiful, almost mocking in its serenity. Every leaf held droplets of rain that caught the early sun like scattered diamonds. The air was clean and sharp, carrying the green scent of earth refreshed and renewed. Birds sang from every tree, their chorus a celebration of survival, of morning's triumph over night's chaos. His footsteps on the gravel path seemed unnaturally loud, each one taking him further from the most real thing he'd ever experienced. Clark didn't look back, couldn't bear to see the cottage growing smaller in the distance, couldn't risk the possibility of seeing her at a window, watching him go. The walk to the main road took 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. With each step, Clark felt something inside him hardening, like wet clay being fired in a kiln. The businessman was reassembling himself piece by piece, preparing to face the world that waited beyond this enchanted morning. By the time he reached the intersection where his phone finally found reception, he had almost convinced himself that he was doing the right thing. That honor lay in keeping promises, even promises that broke your heart. Almost. His phone erupted with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts from an assistant panicking about the morning meeting. The real world rushed back in digital waves, each message pulling him further from the dream and deeper into the life he'd built so carefully. He called for a tow truck, postponed the Atlanta meeting, arranged for a rental car. The familiar routine of problem-solving wrapped around him like armor, protecting him from the magnitude of what he'd just done, what he was still doing with every step away from her. But even as he handled each small crisis, part of him remained in that cottage, lying beside a woman who painted storms and saw straight through his carefully constructed facades to the man beneath. Inside the cottage, Bobby woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the infinite emptiness of a bed that should have held two. She lay still for a moment, eyes closed, listening to the silence that confirmed what she already knew. He was gone. She rose slowly, wrapping herself in the quilt that still carried his scent. Expensive cologne mingled with rain and something uniquely Clark. Barefoot, she padded through the cottage, knowing what she would find, but needing to confirm it anyway, like pressing on a bruise to measure the depth of damage. The canvas bag on the table drew her with magnetic inevitability. She stared at the money inside, so much money, and at the brief note that tried to reduce rapture to a simple transaction. Her vision blurred as tears came, hot and unwanted. "No," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. "That's not what this was. You know that's not what this was." But the money sat there like an accusation, transforming the most beautiful night of her life into something that felt tawdry, commercial. As if what they'd shared could be purchased. As if she were a service to be compensated rather than a woman who had opened her heart completely to a stranger in a storm. Bobby sank into a kitchen chair, the bag heavy in her lap. She thought about burning the money, throwing it away, sending it back somehow. But she was a practical woman, an artist living month to month on sporadic sales. The cash could buy supplies for months, repair the leaky roof before winter descended. In earnest, fix the heating system that barely functioned. She laughed, but it emerged as more sob than sound. How perfectly practical, how utterly devastating. Standing abruptly, she shoved the money into a drawer, slamming it shut as if she could lock away the pain along with the cash. She wouldn't spend it, couldn't, but she couldn't throw it away either. Maybe someday she'd understand why he'd left it. Maybe someday she'd understand why he'd left at all. Bobby made coffee with shaking hands and stood at the window, staring out at the road where his footprints were already disappearing in the morning dew. The sun climbed higher, burning away, the last physical evidence of the storm's passage. Soon, it would be as if the tempest had never happened, as if the night had been nothing more than a fevered dream. But her heart knew better. Her body remembered, and deep in her core, something whispered with ancient certainty that last night's storm had left more than just memories in its wake. She thought about the promise she'd extracted from him, to not look back, to keep their night perfect and untarnished. It had seemed wise in the darkness, a way to preserve something precious from the corrosion of ordinary life. But standing in her empty cottage, with his money in her drawer and his absence like a physical ache, she wondered if she'd been protecting him or herself. The coffee grew cold in her hands as morning wore on. Somewhere Clark was returning to his world of board meetings and business deals, already becoming the man he'd been before the storm. She wondered if he'd think of her, if he'd remember the way they'd moved together, the words they'd whispered, the connection that had blazed between them like lightning. The cardinal that lived in the oak tree landed on her windowsill, its red feathers brilliant as fresh blood against the sky. Bobby watched it, remembering Clark's wonder at her paintings, the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her art, when he'd looked at her. "Stupid bird," she told the cardinal, tears flowing freely now. "Don't you know, perfect endings are just another kind of breaking." But even as she wept, her artist's eye was already cataloguing the interplay of light and shadow, the contrast between sorrow and morning's beauty. By afternoon, she knew she would be painting, not the storm this time, but its aftermath. The peculiar emptiness that follows intensity, the ache of absence, the terrible beauty of something ended too soon. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach in a gesture that would become habit in the weeks to come. Something whispered at the edges of her awareness, a change too new to name, but already as inevitable as the sunrise that had driven him away. The cardinal flew off, and Bobby stood alone in her kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the most extraordinary night of her life. Outside, the world continued its ordinary rotations. Inside, everything had changed. She had asked for a perfect ending. She had gotten one, but perfection, she was learning, could cut deeper than any imperfection ever could. Chapter 4. What the Storm Left Behind. 6 weeks, 42 days, 1008 hours since the storm had rewritten her life. Bobby stood in the cramped bathroom of her cottage, gripping the edges of the porcelain sink as she stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hand. 2 pink lines glared back at her, undeniable as sunrise, inevitable as the sickness that had sent her racing to the bathroom each morning for the past 2 weeks. The test clattered against the sink as she set it down, her reflection in the old mirror wavering through. Sudden tears. She looked different somehow, not just the physical changes her body had been whispering about, but something deeper, a knowing in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns. On the white walls, everything looked the same as it had 6 weeks ago, yet nothing would ever be the same again. Even her paintings had changed without her conscious direction, the harsh angles softening into curves, the storm series giving way to gentler themes of growth and hidden life. "Well," she whispered to her reflection, attempting bravado that crumbled before it could fully form, "looks like the storm left more than memories." The cottage suddenly felt impossibly small, its walls closing in with the weight of this new reality. How could she raise a child here? The ancient heating system wheezed through winter nights. The roof leaked in 3 places during heavy rain. Her income from art sales barely covered her own needs, let alone a baby's. Yet even as practical fears tried to take root, something else bloomed in her chest. A love so fierce and immediate, it took her breath away. This child, this unexpected gift from one extraordinary night, was already the most important thing in her world. Bobby pressed her palm against her still flat stomach, imagining she could feel the tiny heartbeat echoing her own. 1,000 questions swirled through her mind. Boy or girl? Would they have Clark's distinctive blue-green eyes or her warm brown ones? His analytical mind or her artistic soul? Or perhaps, miraculously, both? She walked to her studio space on unsteady legs, drawn by instinct to the easel that had been her confessional for 6 weeks. The painting she'd been working on that morning stared back at her, another in what she'd privately termed her after series. This one showed seedlings pushing through dark earth toward unseen light, their tender green shoots both vulnerable and indomitable. Her hands moved without conscious thought, loading a brush with warm amber and rose gold. The familiar weight of the brush centered her, gave her racing thoughts an outlet. She painted as morning gave way to afternoon, lost in the meditation of creation, letting her hands translate what her heart couldn't yet put into words. Hours dissolved into brush strokes. The sun tracked across the sky, changing the light in her studio, but Bobby remained absorbed in the world emerging on her canvas. It wasn't until her back began to protest that she stepped back to see what she'd created. A heart again, but transformed. From her usual anatomical studies, this one was formed entirely of two figures intertwined, abstract but unmistakably a man and a woman, their bodies creating the chambers and vessels, their connection the very architecture of life. And there, where their forms met in the center, a third shape was beginning to emerge, small, luminous, unmistakably present. "Oh," Bobby breathed, understanding flooding through her like warm rain. Her subconscious had known before her mind. Good, accept it. This child wasn't just an accident or consequence. This was continuation, creation, the universe's answer to a question she hadn't known to ask. The sound of tires on gravel pulled her from her reverie. Through the window, she saw Marcus's pickup truck navigating the long drive, arriving early for their standing weekly dinner. She glanced at the clock, surprised to find it was already past 4. "Bobby girl," Marcus called as he climbed from the truck, using the childhood nickname that never failed to warm her heart. His arms were full of grocery bags, his broad shoulders making the load look effortless. "In here," she called back, quickly draping a cloth over her latest painting. She wasn't ready to share this particular revelation yet. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face creasing into its familiar expression of concern, mixed with affection. "You look tired, baby girl. You been sleeping okay?" "I'm fine," she said automatically, then caught herself. The lie sat heavy on her tongue. "Actually, Mark, can we talk?" Something in her tone must have alerted him, because he set down the groceries and came to sit beside her on the worn sofa she kept in the studio. Big brother instincts on full alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly, it's just..." She took a shaky breath, gathering courage. "Remember that storm 6 weeks ago? The bad one that knocked out power lines across 3 counties? "Of course, I do. Tried to call you that night but couldn't get through. Roads were flooded, couldn't make it out here till the next day. Well, someone else got caught in it. A man. His car went off the road right outside." Marcus's protective instincts sharpened visibly. And I took him in. He was hurt, hypothermic. I couldn't just leave him in the storm. "Bobby." Her name carried the weight of 1,000 brotherly warnings. "I know what you're thinking. And you're right. It was risky letting a stranger in. But Mark, he was dying out there. And he was..." She struggled for words that wouldn't sound like cliches. "He was kind, gentle. We talked all night about art and life and dreams. And then, understanding dawned on Marcus's face, followed swiftly by anger. "He took advantage of you. I'll kill him. What's his name? Where does he live?" "No." Bobby grabbed his arm before he could rise. "It wasn't like that. It was mutual. We both felt something that night. Something real. So real he left the next morning without a goodbye." The words stung because they held truth. "I told him to go, made him promise not to complicate things. And now I'm carrying his child, and he'll never know. And maybe that's for the best." She looked at her brother, seeing the conflict in his eyes. "I need you to support me in this. Not judge, not try to fix it. Just be my brother." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her into the kind of hug that had sheltered her through scraped knees and broken hearts and their parents' deaths. "Always, Bobby girl, you know that." They sat like that as shadows lengthened across the studio floor, siblings bound by shared history and unconditional love. Finally, Marcus pulled back, determination replacing worry on his face. "So, I'm gonna be an uncle?" Despite everything, Bobby smiled. Yeah, you are. Well then. He stood, practical as always. We got work to do. That roof ain't gonna fix itself, and no niece or nephew of mine is living under leaky shingles. Mark? Nope. Don't want to hear it. Your family. This baby's... Your family, and family takes care of family. He paused at the doorway, a grin breaking through. Besides, someone's got to teach this kid how to change oil and throw a football. What if it's a girl? Especially if it's a girl. My niece is going to be the most self-sufficient person in Mississippi. After he left to get tools from his truck, Bobby stood alone in her studio, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Outside, she could hear Marcus already measuring and planning, translating love into action the way their family always had. She uncovered her painting, studying the intertwined figures and the small form growing between them. Tomorrow would bring doctor's appointments and practical preparations. Tomorrow, she would start planning for a future she'd never imagined. But today, in this suspended moment between her old life and her new one, she allowed herself to simply feel. Fear, yes, but underneath it, something stronger. Anticipation, purpose, and a love so deep, it seemed to rewire her very cells. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that reminded her of the morning after the storm. Somewhere in Atlanta, or wherever his life had taken him, Clark was probably finishing his workday, returning to whatever existence he'd thought worth leaving her for. She wondered if he ever watched sunsets anymore, or if he'd retreated back into the colorblind world he'd described that night. It didn't matter now. Some connections transcend knowledge, exist beyond understanding. Bobby touched her belly again, imagining she could already feel the flutter of new life. I promise you, she whispered to the child growing inside her. You'll know so much love. You'll grow up surrounded by art and family and color. You'll know who you are, even if you never know his name. The last light faded from the sky, and the first stars began to appear. Marcus's hammering provided a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. The sound of family, of preparation, of love made manifest in practical things. Bobby picked up her brush, again, adding tiny details to the small form in her painting. Each stroke was a promise, a prayer, a welcome to the unexpected gift the storm had left behind. Some storms, she was learning, left treasures in their wake. Sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in uncertainty, delivered by chaos, nurtured by courage. Outside, the world turned on its axis, carrying her toward an unknown future. But inside this cottage that had witnessed the beginning of everything, Bobby Mangum painted her way forward, one brushstroke at a time, carrying within her the most beautiful aftermath of any storm. New life, unexpected and perfect, and hers to protect. Chapter 5. The Weight of Silence. 8 months crawled by like honey in winter, each day stretching her body and testing her spirit. December arrived with unusual warmth, the Mississippi air heavy with humidity instead of frost. Bobby maneuvered, her swollen belly through the grand doors of the Mississippi Arts Commission building, one hand pressed against her lower back where a persistent ache had taken residence. Her paintings for the Emerging Artists Showcase had been delivered weeks ago, but she'd insisted on attending the pre-opening preparations, needing this last taste of normalcy before her world shifted completely. 3 more steps, little one, she murmured to her belly, gripping the banister as she climbed to the gallery space. The baby responded with a sharp kick to her ribs, as if protesting the exertion. The gallery buzzed with controlled chaos, assistants adjusting lights, caterers setting up stations, the soft percussion of hammers as final pieces were hung. Bobby's corner had been arranged exactly as she'd requested, her After the Storm series, creating a narrative arc from destruction to renewal. Bobby, thank God. Janelle, the exhibition coordinator, materialized at her elbow with barely contained panic. The lighting tech needs to know about the spotlight angles for pieces 6 through 8. For the next hour, Bobby lost herself in the familiar dance of exhibition preparation. It felt good to focus on angles and aesthetics instead of swollen ankles and sleepless nights. Her back protested constantly now, the baby sitting lower each day. But here among her paintings, she felt like herself again. Artist first, expectant mother second. These are extraordinary. The cultured voice broke through her concentration. Bobby turned to find an elegant older woman studying her largest canvas with the intensity of a true collector. Everything about her spoke of wealth and influence. The understated designer suit, the Hermes scarf, the way she held herself as if accustomed to rooms reorganizing themselves around her presence. "Thank you," Bobby replied, recognizing Victoria Pemberton, one of Jackson's most powerful patrons. There's such emotional authenticity here, the rawness, the hope. It's like you've captured the exact moment when destruction transforms into creation. Victoria moved closer, examining the brushwork with practiced eyes. "I haven't seen this caliber of emotional depth in years. Are you represented?" "Not yet. I've been selling independently, mostly regional shows and local collectors." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand emerged holding a business card. "We need to discuss your future. I have connections in Atlanta, New York, even internationally. Work like this deserves proper exposure." Joy leaped in Bobby's chest. This was the break she'd dreamed of, the validation she'd craved. But before she could respond, pain lanced across her lower back, sharp enough to steal her breath. She gripped the nearest display stand, trying to breathe through what had to be another Braxton Hicks contraction. "Are you all right?" Victoria's professional demeanor evaporated, replaced by maternal concern. "Fine," Bobby managed through gritted teeth. "Just false labor, been having them all week." But as she straightened, something shifted inside her, a sensation like a water balloon bursting. Warm fluid trickled down her legs, pooling on the gallery's polished floor. "Oh," she gasped, staring at the spreading puddle. "Oh no, not now." Victoria took charge instantly, her phone already at her ear. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No, I can..." Another contraction cut off Bobby's protest, this one serious enough to double her over. The Braxton Hicks had been rehearsals. This was opening night. "Janelle!" Victoria's voice carried authority that brought the coordinator running. "We need help here." The next minutes blurred into organized chaos. Concerned faces, gentle hands. Guiding her to a chair, someone timing contractions on their phone. Through waves of increasing pain, Bobby's mind raced with panicked thoughts. Too early. The nursery wasn't finished. She hadn't packed a hospital bag. Marcus was in Memphis until tonight. 5 minutes apart, someone announced. "We need to move. Now." Victoria's steady voice cut through the fog. "My car's right outside, faster than waiting for an ambulance." They helped her stand, but Bobby's legs trembled beneath her. "The exhibition will be fine without us," Victoria said firmly. "Priorities, my dear." The drive to the hospital passed in a haze of contractions and controlled breathing. Victoria navigated traffic with surprising skill, keeping up a stream of calm conversation between Bobby's gasps of pain. "Is there someone we should call? The father?" "No," Bobby panted, gripping the door handle through another wave. He's not just my brother, Marcus Mangum. His number's in my phone." Victoria made the call, hands-free, straight to voicemail. Marcus's worksite probably had no reception. She left a message, then called the hospital to alert them of their arrival. The emergency entrance swallowed them in efficient medical choreography. Suddenly, Bobby was in a wheelchair, then a bed, then a delivery room, nurses checking dilation and monitoring the baby's heartbeat. The contractions came faster now, each one lifting her out of herself, away from thought into pure sensation. 7 centimeters already, the nurse announced cheerfully. "This little one's in a hurry." Through the fog of pain, Bobby found herself thinking of Clark. Would their child have his eyes, That impossible blue-green that changed with the light, his gentle hands, his way of seeing beauty in unexpected places. Time became fluid, measured only in the spaces between contractions. Victoria stayed, this stranger-turned guardian angel holding Bobby's hand and offering ice chips. At some point, Marcus burst through the door, still in his work clothes, having driven at illegal speeds from Memphis. "I'm here, Bobby girl," he said, taking her other hand. "I'm here." The final stage came faster than anyone expected. Bobby felt herself swept up in forces beyond her control, her body knowing what to do, even as her mind scattered like startled birds. "Push," the doctor commanded, and she did, drawing on reserves she didn't know she possessed. She thought of storms and creation, of that night 8 months ago when lightning had rewritten her destiny. She thought of her paintings waiting in the gallery, of the mother who wasn't here to guide her, of the man who didn't know he was about to become a father. One more big push, almost there. With a final surge that seemed to pull from the very core of her being, Bobby felt her baby slide free. A moment of breathless silence, then a cry, loud and indignant and perfect. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the squirming infant on Bobby's chest. Bobby looked down at her daughter and felt the world reorganize itself around this tiny person. The baby's eyes opened, newborn blue, but already showing hints of something else. A rim of green around the pupils, a depth that seemed impossible in someone so new. "Hello, sweet girl," Bobby whispered, tears streaming freely. "I'm your mama." The baby's tiny fist closed around Bobby's finger with surprising strength, and in that grip, Bobby felt her entire future reshape itself. "She's beautiful," Victoria said softly from her corner of the room. "What's her name?" Bobby had made lists, tried different sounds, but nothing had felt right. Now, looking into her daughter's knowing eyes, the name came without thought. "Maya," she said with certainty. "Maya Grace." "Maya," Victoria repeated thoughtfully. "In Sanskrit it means illusion, but also God's creative power." How perfect. Perfect indeed. Her daughter, born from a night that felt like illusion now, yet represented the most creative act of her life. Maya, magical and powerful and real. The next hours passed in a blur of tests and measurements, of learning to nurse and change diapers. Marcus held his niece with infinite tenderness, already wrapped around her tiny finger. Victoria stayed longer than necessary, making calls to ensure the exhibition would proceed smoothly without them. Finally, as evening settled over the hospital, Bobby found herself alone with Maya for the first time. The baby lay in her arms, alert and watchful, those remarkable eyes studying her mother's face as if memorizing every detail. "Your daddy doesn't know about you," Bobby whispered into the quiet room. "He's out there somewhere, probably in a big office building, making important decisions. He's brilliant and kind and sees beauty everywhere, just like you will." Maya made a small sound, not quite a coo, more like acknowledgement. "I'll tell you about him someday, about the storm that brought us together and the morning that took him away, about how sometimes love happens in an instant, but lasts forever, even when people can't stay together." The hospital room settled into nighttime quiet, punctuated only by distant footsteps and the soft beeping of monitors. Bobby thought about her paintings waiting in the gallery, about the business card in her purse that might change everything, about the life she'd planned that had just been completely rewritten. Everything was different now. But as she looked down at Maya's perfect face, she felt no fear, only fierce determination. She would build something beautiful for them both, one brushstroke at a time. "I promise you," she whispered to her daughter, "you'll know so much love. You'll grow up surrounded by art and family and possibility. You'll know exactly who you are, even if you don't know his name." Maya's eyes drifted closed, tiny mouth making sucking motions in her sleep. Bobby held her close, marveling at this small life that had grown from one extraordinary night. 8 months ago, a storm had raged. Tonight, the skies were clear and a new star had entered the world. Somewhere in Atlanta or beyond, Clark Dawson was living his life, unaware that in a Jackson hospital room, a piece of himself had just taken her first breaths. Perhaps it was better this way. Some connections transcend knowledge, exist beyond understanding. Love didn't always require presence. Sometimes it was enough to simply be, to carry forward the gift of that one perfect night into whatever future awaited. Bobby kissed Maya's forehead and settled back against the pillows. Tomorrow would bring challenges, feeding schedules and diaper changes and the beautiful chaos of new motherhood. Tomorrow she would figure out how to be both artist and mother, how to provide for this unexpected blessing. But tonight she was complete. Tonight, holding her daughter while stars appeared one by one outside the window, Bobby Mangum knew with absolute certainty that some storms left behind treasures worth any price. The greatest art, after all, was life itself. Chapter 6. 8 years after. The afternoon sun slanted through the towering windows of the McKenna Gallery, transforming white walls into canvases of gold. Clark Dawson stood transfixed before a large painting, lost in the swirling blues and grays that seemed to move even as he watched them. Storm Series number 7 read the small placard beside it. The artist had captured something wild and elemental, not merely the visual chaos of a tempest, but its emotional resonance. Looking at it, Clark felt that familiar tightness in his chest, a memory dancing just beyond reach, like trying to grasp smoke. Magnificent, aren't they? Patricia McKenna approached, with practiced grace, offering him champagne he didn't want, but accepted out of politeness. There, he paused, searching for words that wouldn't reveal how deeply the painting affected him. Extraordinary. The artist has captured something I've never seen before. Patricia's smile held the satisfaction of a dealer who recognized genuine interest. Bobby Mangum. She's become quite sought after in the past few years. Started as a regional artist, but her work has this universal quality, speaks to something primal in all of us. Mangum, Clark repeated, the name familiar yet strange on his tongue. She'll be here tonight for the charity gala, along with her daughter, delightful child, quite the little artist herself. Before Clark could respond, movement across the gallery caught his eye. A small girl stood before another painting, her head tilted in concentration. Something about her posture, the way she held herself, sent an inexplicable jolt through him. "If you'll excuse me," Patricia murmured, spotting another potential buyer. Clark found himself moving toward the child as if pulled by invisible strings. As he drew closer, details emerged that made his breath catch. Her skin was lighter than her mother's must be, her hair falling in loose curls that caught the light. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold when she turned. Blue-green, shifting like the sea, impossibly familiar. His eyes, his mother's eyes, his grandmother's eyes. The champagne glass trembled in his hand. "That's my mama's painting," the girl said with the directness of childhood. "She painted it when I was a baby, during a storm. It's..." Clark's voice failed. He cleared his throat, tried again. "It's beautiful. What's your name?" "Maya Grace Mangum. I'm 8. She studied him with those impossible eyes. "Are you here to buy art?" "Mama says most people at these things just come for free wine and tiny foods." Despite the earthquake happening in his chest, Clark found himself smiling. "Your mama sounds wise. She's the smartest person I know and the best artist in the world." Maya declared this as simple fact. "Do you know about art?" "I know a little. I collect it." "That's good. Mama says art needs people who understand it, not just people who match it to their sofas. The gallery noise faded to white static. 8 years. The child was 8 years old. Those eyes, that night, the storm, the cottage. "Bobby! Maya!" A familiar voice called across the gallery, and Clark's world tilted off its axis. She stood 20 feet away, more beautiful than memory had allowed. Her hair was shorter now, styled elegantly for the event. She wore a deep blue dress that made her skin glow. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes flecked with gold, were exactly as he remembered. They found Maya first, then traveled to him, and he watched recognition dawn like a slow-motion car crash. All color drained from her face. "Mama!" Maya bounded over, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. "This man likes your storm. Paintings, he knows about art." Bobby's mouth opened, closed, opened again. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Hello, Clark." He saw the moment Maya registered the undercurrent, the way children do, sensing emotional weather with unerring accuracy. Her gaze ping-ponged between them, then settled on Clark with new intensity. "You know my mama? Bobby's voice cracked. "We met once, long ago, during a storm." The words hit Clark like physical blows. Once, long ago. As if that night hadn't reshaped his entire existence, as if he hadn't spent 8 years seeing her face in every crowd, finding her paintings in galleries across the South, building a collection of her work without knowing why. "I need some air," Bobby said suddenly. "Maya, honey, why don't you go find Uncle Marcus? I think he's by the dessert table." "But Mama, please, baby." Something in her mother's tone made Maya obey, but not before giving Clark one last penetrating look. When she was gone, silence stretched between them like a chasm. 8 years, Clark said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "She's 8 years old. Clark, she's mine." It wasn't a question. The evidence was written in every line of Maya's face, in those eyes that had stared back at him from mirrors his entire life. Bobby's chin lifted, her protective instincts flaring. "She's mine. I carried her. I raised her. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school, every—" "Why didn't you tell me?" The words came out more broken than angry. "I had a right to know." "Did you?" Fire flashed in her eyes now. "You left, Clark. You walked out at dawn with cash on the table like I was some kind of—" She cut herself off, aware of the public space. "You made it clear what that night was. You told me to leave. You made me promise not to look back. And you kept that promise beautifully. Not one attempt to find me. Not one—" "I tried." His voice broke. 6 months later, I came back. The cottage was empty, for sale. I hired investigators, but all I had was your first name and memories. The fight seemed to leave her. She looked smaller suddenly, vulnerable in a way that twisted his heart. I moved to Jackson when I was 6 months pregnant. I couldn't stay there. Too many ghosts. They stood in their bubble of shared pain while the gala swirled around them. Laughter, clinking glasses, oblivious celebration. Clark's mind raced with 8 years of missed moments. First words, first steps, birthdays, bedtime stories, all the tiny miracles that made up a childhood. "She doesn't know," Bobby said quietly. "I told her that her father was someone special who couldn't be with us. She thinks you died." The words hit like a physical blow. Christ, Bobby. What was I supposed to tell her? That her father chose to leave, that he didn't want, and I didn't know. The words came out louder than intended, drawing curious glances. He lowered his voice. "I didn't know about her. How could you think I wouldn't want my own child? Because you left." Her voice was small now, almost lost in the gallery noise. "Because you were so careful to make it just one night. Because I was protecting her from rejection, from a father who might walk away again." Clark felt something crack inside his chest. All these years, while he'd been nursing his own wounds, she'd been raising their daughter alone, convinced he'd abandoned them both. "I need..." He ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. "Can I meet her properly?" "Not tonight, not like this, but she's happy, Clark. We have a good life. There's someone else now, a good man who loves her like his own. I won't let you disrupt. I'm her father." The words felt strange and right on his tongue. "I've already missed 8 years. Please don't make me miss any more." Across the gallery, Maya had found her uncle, but kept glancing back at them, her intelligent eyes reading the tension. Their daughter. The living proof of that night. Beautiful and curious and completely unaware her world was about to change. "Bobby, darling," Victoria Pemberton's voice cut through their standoff. "The auction's about to begin. They need you on stage for the artist introduction." She glanced between them, sensing drama. "Unless this is a bad time?" "No," Bobby said, squaring her shoulders. "The timing's perfect." She looked at Clark, her eyes unreadable. "We'll talk after. We have to talk after." As she walked toward the stage, Clark remained frozen, watching their daughter follow her mother with the easy confidence of a child secure in her place in the world. Maya caught him looking and waved, a small gesture that nearly brought him to his knees. 8 years of carefully constructed walls had crumbled in minutes. The storm he'd thought had passed had only been gathering strength, waiting for this moment to break. And now, with the echo of his daughter's voice in his ears and the ghost of Bobby's pain in his heart, Clark realized that some storms never really end. They just circle back around, stronger and more complex than before, demanding the courage to face what you've run from. He touched his phone in his pocket, thinking of the calls he'd need to make, the meetings to cancel, the life to rearrange, because he wasn't leaving this time. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would earn his place in his daughter's life. The storm had returned, and this time, Clark Dawson would weather it to the end. Chapter 7. Truths in the Garden. The McKenna Gallery's rooftop garden existed as a world apart from the chaos below, an oasis of carefully cultivated wildness where night-blooming jasmine perfumed the air and string lights created constellations against the darkening sky. The city sparkled beyond the garden walls, but here among the roses and boxwood, time seemed suspended. Bobby found a weathered teak bench near a bubbling fountain and sank onto it, her legs finally surrendering to the trembling she'd been fighting. Since she'd seen Clark's face, the evening breeze caught her dress, and she pulled her shawl tighter, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with temperature. She heard his footsteps on the gravel path before she saw him, measured, careful, as if he were approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Perhaps that's what she was now, cornered by the past she'd thought safely buried. "I figured you'd need space," Clark said quietly, maintaining distance until she nodded toward the bench. He sat, careful to leave a gap between them, not the comfortable space of strangers, but the calculated distance of people who'd once been everything and now were nothing. The fountain's music filled their silence, while Bobby gathered scattered thoughts like scattered pearls. "Tell me about her," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of 8 lost years. "Please, I need to know everything I've missed." The pain in his words cracked something open in Bobby's chest. Whatever anger she'd nursed, whatever justifications she'd built, they crumbled in the face of a father's raw hunger to know his child. "She was born December 15th, she began softly, her voice finding its rhythm in the familiar story. 2 weeks early, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. The nurse said she came out with her eyes wide open, like she was searching for something. Were you alone?" The question came hesitantly, as if he feared the answer. "Victoria was there. She drove me to the hospital when my water broke at the gallery opening. And Marcus came, drove like a madman from Memphis. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. But yes, essentially, alone. I kept reaching for a hand that wasn't there. Clark made a sound, part sigh, part groan. I should have been there, if I'd known. But you didn't. The words came without accusation now, simply fact. And I made sure of that. Why? He turned to face her fully. Help me understand, Bobby. Why didn't you try to find me? My name, my company. It wouldn't have been impossible. She watched the fountains dance, remembering those early weeks of pregnancy when she'd stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking in search boxes, his name half-typed before she'd always hit delete. I did try, once. The admission came quietly. When I was about 4 months along, found your company website, your professional bio. Clark Dawson, CEO of Meridian Enterprises, engaged to Victoria Pemberton of the Atlanta Pembertons. His sharp intake of breath made her look at him. What? Your bio. It mentioned your engagement, recent photo from some charity function, you and a beautiful blonde who looked like she belonged in your world. The wedding was planned for spring. Jesus. Clark ran both hands through his hair. That bio was never updated. Victoria and I had broken up 6 months before the storm. Before I met you, my marketing team I never thought to... The revelation hit Bobby like cold water. All these years thinking she'd protected Maya from a man who'd chosen another family, when the truth was, you thought I was getting married, that I'd cheated with you. What else could I think? The words tumbled out now, years of buried hurt rising to the surface. You left money, Clark, like I was a business transaction. Then I find out you're engaged. I wasn't going to be the other woman, wasn't going to show up pregnant and destroy your life. So you decided for both of us. I decided for Maya. She deserved better than being someone's secret, someone's mistake. She was never a mistake. His voice turned fierce, not for 1 second. And you, that night, it wasn't some random, wasn't it? Bobby stood abruptly, needing distance. One night, Clark, that's all it was supposed to be. That's what I asked for. Is that really what you wanted? The question hung in the jasmine-scented air. Bobby walked to the garden's edge where the city lights blurred through sudden tears. 8 years of carefully constructed walls, and he could still see straight through them. I was scared, she admitted to the night sky. Terrified. You crashed into my life with your expensive suit and your lost eyes, and suddenly I was feeling things I'd sworn off forever. So yes, I made rules, set boundaries, told myself one perfect night was better than inevitable disappointment. And when you found out about Maya, I convinced myself I was being noble, protecting everyone, you from obligation, her from rejection, myself from hope. She felt rather than heard him approach, his presence warm at her back. I came back, he said quietly. 6 months later, drove that same road in broad daylight, found your cottage empty with a for sale sign, spent weeks trying to track down the mysterious artist who'd saved my life. Bobby turned, searching his face. You did. The investigator found 3 women named Bobby in the county. 2 were in their 70s. The third had moved to Jackson with no forwarding address. By then, I convinced myself you were right, that our perfect night should stay perfect, that looking for you was selfish. And now? Now I know I have a daughter, a brilliant, beautiful daughter who has my mother's eyes and your artistic soul, who thinks I'm dead because that was easier than explaining why I wasn't there. The pain in his voice made Bobby's throat tight. I never said you were dead, just gone, unable to be with us. She filled in the blanks herself. She's happy, truly? Yes, Bobby's voice softened. She's extraordinary, Clark. Funny and smart and creative. She sees the world like an artist but thinks like an engineer, always taking things apart to understand them, then painting what she finds inside. Like her mother. Like both of us, I think. They stood in comfortable silence, the garden working its magic around them. Somewhere below, the gala continued. Auctions and small talk and careful networking. But here, two people picked through the wreckage of choices made in fear. "There's someone else," Bobby said eventually. "James, a pediatric surgeon. He's been in our lives for about a year. Maya adores him." Something flickered across Clark's face. Not jealousy exactly, but a recognition of all he'd missed. "Does she call him Dad?" "No, he's just James, but he wants to marry me, wants to adopt Maya. And you? What do you want?" The question she'd been avoiding for months. "I want Maya to be happy, to have stability, to grow up feeling secure and loved." "That's not what I asked." She met his gaze then, seeing in it the same intensity that had undone her 8 years ago. "I don't know anymore. An hour ago I had it all figured out. Good man, good life, safe choices. Then you walked back into my world and suddenly what? Suddenly I remember what it feels like when lightning strikes, when safe isn't enough." The admission hung between them, dangerous as a lit match near kindling. Clark stepped closer, and Bobby didn't retreat. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said carefully, "but I want to know my daughter, want to be part of her life, whatever that looks like. Can we start there?" "She'll have questions about where you've been, why you left. I'll answer them, honestly, appropriately. We'll figure it out together. Together." The word felt foreign and familiar all at once. "Okay," Bobby said finally. "We can try, slowly, carefully, with Maya's needs coming first. Always." He paused, then added, "I'm staying in Jackson. Already started looking at houses. This isn't a visit, Bobby. I'm here for good." The declaration should have frightened her. Instead, something in her chest loosened, a knot she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "She has art class Saturday mornings," Bobby heard herself say. "You could come to dinner after. Let her get to know you gradually." "I'd like that." They walked back toward the gallery together, not touching but aware of each other in the way of people who'd shared more than they'd meant to. At the door, Clark paused. "Bobby? That morning when I left, I need you to know. The money wasn't payment. I was trying to, I don't know, take care of you somehow. Make sure you were okay after the storm. It was clumsy and stupid, but it was never about cheapening what happened." She nodded, throat tight. "I think I knew that, eventually, but by then the damage was done. So much damage," he agreed. "But maybe some things can be repaired." Inside, the gala swirled on. Bobby spotted Maya near the chocolate fountain with James, both laughing at something Marcus had said. Her family, her carefully constructed life. And now Clark, no longer the ghost that haunted her paintings, but a real presence that would reshape everything. "Saturday," she said. 6 o'clock. Maya likes spaghetti." "Saturday," he agreed. They parted ways, but Bobby felt his eyes on her as she crossed to her daughter. Maya looked up, chocolate smudging her chin, those impossible eyes bright with curiosity. "Mama, was that man your friend?" "Something like that, baby." He seemed sad. Children saw everything, Bobby reflected. Cut straight through adult pretense to the heart of things. "Maybe a little," she agreed, "but I think he'll be happier soon." "Good," Maya declared. "Nobody should be sad at parties." Looking at her daughter, their daughter, Bobby felt the future reshaping itself. Not the safe, predictable path she'd planned, but something wilder, something that might demand more courage than she knew she possessed. But then, she'd weathered storms before. Chapter 8. The Truth Unfolds. Saturday arrived wrapped in autumn gold, the Mississippi air crisp enough to hint at winter's approach. Clark stood on Bobby's front porch at precisely 5:45, holding a gift bag and fighting the urge to pace. 3 days of preparation hadn't calmed the hurricane in his chest. Meeting your 8-year-old daughter for the first time defied all his boardroom training. The door opened before he could knock. Bobby stood there in jeans and a paint-splattered sweater, her hair pulled back in a familiar messy bun that made his heart stutter. "You're early," she said, but her tone held no reproach. "Nervous habit. I've been sitting in my car for 20 minutes. Her expression softened. "She's nervous too, been asking questions all day. I told her an old friend was coming to dinner, someone special who knew her story." Her story? That's what she calls it. The story of the night she began. She's always been fascinated by that storm. Before Clark could respond, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Maya appeared, then stopped abruptly, studying him with those remarkable eyes. She'd changed from her art class clothes into a purple dress with sparkly butterflies, clearly chosen with care. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "You're the man from the gallery." "I am. And you're the artist who painted Love Storm." Her face lit up. "You remembered. Most grown-ups don't really listen when kids talk about art." "Well, I'm not most grown-ups." He held out the gift bag. "I brought you something. Your mom mentioned you like to read." Maya took the bag with careful hands, pulling out a leather-bound sketchbook and a set of professional artist pencils. Her eyes widened. "These are real artist pencils, like Mama uses." "For a real artist," Clark said seriously. "I thought you might like to draw the story of tonight." She clutched the gifts to her chest, looking between him and Bobby. "Why tonight?" Bobby knelt beside her daughter, smoothing her hair. "Because tonight is special, baby. Remember how you always ask about your father? About the night of the storm?" Maya nodded, her whole body going still. "This is Clark, sweetheart. He's your dad." The silence stretched like spun glass, fragile and crystalline. Maya's gaze fixed on Clark, studying him with an intensity that belonged on someone much older. He watched emotions flicker across her face: confusion, wonder, a dawning recognition. "My dad." Her voice came out whisper soft. "But Mama said, I thought you were..." "I didn't know about you," Clark said gently, crouching to her eye level. "If I had known, nothing could have kept me away. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be." Maya turned to Bobby. "You said he couldn't be with us, that he was gone." "I did, baby, and I was wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they're scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of being hurt. Scared of hoping too much." Bobby's voice, uncaught, but mostly scared of not being enough. Maya processed this with the directness of childhood. She looked back at Clark. "Do you want to be my dad now?" "More than anything in the world. Will you go away again?" "Never." The vow came from his soul. "I've already bought a house here in Jackson. My home is wherever you are now." She considered this, then held out her hand with formal gravity. "I'm Maya Grace Mangum. I'm 8 years old. I like to paint and read and make up stories. My favorite color is purple, and I don't like Brussels sprouts." Clark took her small hand in his, throat tight. "I'm Clark Dawson. I'm 39 years old. I like jazz music and thunderstorms and looking at art. My favorite color is blue, and I don't like Brussels sprouts either." "That's good," Maya decided. Families should agree about vegetables. The simple acceptance undid him. Clark blinked hard against threatening tears, while Maya tugged him toward the living room, already chattering about her art class project. Dinner unfolded with surprising ease. Maya commanded the conversation, peppering Clark with questions between bites of spaghetti. Did he have pets? No, but he'd always wanted a dog. Could he draw? Badly, but he appreciated those who could. Did he like museums? Very much. Had he ever seen the ocean? Many times. "I've never seen the ocean," Maya announced. "Mama says we'll go someday when her paintings sell for lots of money." Her paintings already sell for lots of money, Clark said, catching Bobby's eye. Your mother is famous in the art world. She is? Maya beamed with pride. I knew she was the best, but famous too. After dinner, Maya insisted on showing Clark her room. He followed her upstairs, marveling at how quickly children could adapt to earth-shaking changes. Her room was an explosion of creativity, paintings covering every wall, books stacked on every surface, an easel in the corner holding her latest work. This is where I paint, she explained, showing him her workspace. Mama says I have natural talent, but talent needs practice, so I practice every day. She's right, about both things. Maya pulled a photo album from her bookshelf. Want to see? In pictures, Mama made this for me. They sat on her bed, Maya curled against his side as naturally as if they'd done this 1,000 times. Page by page, she walked him through her life. Birthdays, holidays, first days of school. Clark's heart ached with each image, each moment he'd missed. How come there aren't any pictures of you? Maya asked, echoing the question she'd posed at the gallery. Because I didn't know about you then. But there will be pictures from now on. If that's okay with you. She nodded firmly. I want pictures with my dad. The simple declaration broke through his last defenses. Clark pulled her close, breathing in the little girl's scent of strawberry shampoo and possibility. The simple declaration broke through his last defenses. Clark pulled her close, breathing in the little girl's scent of strawberry shampoo and possibility. I used to dream about you, Maya confided. Before I knew you were real, I dreamed about someone with eyes like mine who would teach me things and read me stories. What kind of stories? Adventure ones, and mysteries, and sometimes fairy tales, but not the boring princess ones. The ones with magic and storms, and brave people doing impossible things. I know lots of those stories, and we can find new ones together. Promise? Promise. Bobby appeared in the doorway, watching them with an expression Clark couldn't quite read. Bath time, Maya. But Mama, no arguments. You can show Clark more tomorrow. Tomorrow? Maya perked up. He's coming back tomorrow. If you want me to, Clark said. Every day, Maya declared. Families see each other every day. After she'd been tucked in, insisting on hugs from both parents, Clark and Bobby found themselves on the front porch again, the evening air carrying the scent of late roses from the garden. She's amazing, Clark said. So open, so accepting. You've raised an incredible child. She's been asking about you forever, drawing pictures of what she thought you might look like. Always getting the eyes right somehow. They stood in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. The ordinary magic of a Saturday evening in Mississippi made extraordinary by the seismic shift in their universe. I meant what I said. About the house. About staying. Clark turned to face her. I know we need to take things slow, figure out what this looks like, but I'm not going anywhere. What about your company? Your life in Atlanta? I've already started restructuring, moving operations, promoting my VP to handle day-to-day management. My life is here now, he paused, with Maya and whatever else develops. The unspoken possibility hung between them. Bobby wrapped her arms around herself, though the evening was warm. James ended things yesterday. Clark straightened. He did. Said he could see it in my face at the gallery, that whoever you were. To me, it changed everything. He's a good man, deserves someone who can love him completely. And you couldn't. I thought I could. Thought I was choosing stability over whatever this is. But then you walked back into my life and I realized I'd been painting the same storm for 8 years. Different canvases, different techniques, but always the same storm. The one that brought us together. The one I never really left. They moved closer without conscious decision, drawn by the same magnetism that had pulled them together 8 years ago. But this time, there was no storm to blame, no excuse of extraordinary circumstances. We should take it slow, Bobby whispered, for Maya's sake. We should, Clark agreed, even as his hand found hers. We have time now, all the time we need. She wants to call you Dad already. Is that okay with you? Bobby squeezed his hand. She's been waiting for you her whole life. We both have, I think. As if summoned, Maya's voice drifted from her bedroom window. Mama! Daddy! I can't sleep. Can you both read me a story? The word Daddy hit Clark like lightning. He looked at Bobby, who smiled despite her tears. Better get used to it, she said. Once she decides something, there's no changing her mind. Wonder where she gets that from. Go. Bobby nudged him toward the door. She likes voices for all, the characters. Clark climbed the stairs to his daughter's room, where Maya waited with a book already chosen. As he settled on one side of her bed and Bobby on the other, their daughter between them, he marveled at how quickly life could reshape itself. 3 days ago, he'd been alone in his Atlanta penthouse, surrounded by success that felt hollow. Tonight, he sat reading about brave princesses who commanded storms, making silly voices that sent Maya into giggles, catching Bobby's eye over their daughter's head. Tomorrow, he'd look at the house he was buying 3 blocks away. Next week, he'd attend Maya's school play. Next month, they'd plan their first family Christmas. The future sprawled before them, uncertain but full of promise. They were building something new from the wreckage of their separation, not trying to recapture that one perfect night, but creating something deeper, stronger, more complex. A family forged in storms but anchored in choice. As Maya's eyes drifted closed, her small hand holding his, Clark understood that sometimes the best stories weren't about perfect endings, but about brave beginnings. And this was the bravest beginning of all. Chapter 9. Unexpected Revelations. 2 months dissolved like watercolors in rain, each day painting new layers onto their evolving family portrait. January brought unseasonable warmth to Jackson, the kind that tricked early buds into blooming and set everyone talking about climate change. Clark had settled into his new house, a craftsman bungalow just 3 blocks from Bobby's, but he spent more evenings at their dinner table than his own. Tonight marked a special occasion. James was coming to dinner. Bobby stirred red beans at the stove, her movements carrying a tension that had nothing to do with cooking. Clark sat at the kitchen table, ostensibly helping Maya with her science fair project, but actually watching Bobby's rigid shoulders. The volcano should erupt with more force, Maya declared, adjusting her papier-mâché mountain. Maybe we need more baking soda. Maybe, Clark agreed absently. Maya, why don't you test that theory in the backyard? Take the supplies out there. Less mess. Good idea. She gathered her materials and headed outside, already focused on perfecting her eruption. Once alone, Clark approached Bobby. You're going to wear a hole in that pot. I just want everything to be perfect. James has been so gracious about everything. About me, you mean? She set down the spoon, turning to face him. About you, about the situation, about stepping aside when a lesser man might have fought. Clark studied her face, seeing the conflict there. Do you wish he had fought? No. The answer came quickly, honestly. But I feel guilty. He deserved better than to be someone's safe choice. You didn't know I'd come back, didn't I? She laughed, but it held no humor. I painted you into every canvas for 8 years. Some part of me was always waiting. The doorbell interrupted whatever Clark might have said. Bobby smoothed her hair nervously, and Clark felt an unexpected sympathy for James, the man who'd loved them both enough to let go. James Harrison stood on the porch holding a bottle of wine and wearing the careful smile of someone determined to handle an awkward situation with grace. He was younger than Clark had expected, early 30s, with the kind, steady presence that would make him an excellent surgeon. James, Bobby accepted the wine with genuine warmth. Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it. Maya's been texting me about her volcano all week. His gaze found Clark. You must be Clark. I'm James." They shook hands, both men taking each other's measure. Clark found himself liking James immediately. His directness, his lack of pretense, the way his eyes softened when he looked at Maya running in from the backyard. "Dr. James," Maya launched herself at him. "You came. Wait till you see my volcano. It's epic. I can't wait. But first I brought you something." He produced a small wrapped box. "For your science fair presentation." Maya tore into the paper, revealing a real stethoscope. Her eyes went wide. "A real one? Not a toy?" "Real doctors need real tools. Thought you might want to check your volcano's heartbeat before it erupts." She threw her arms around him. "Thank you. This is perfect." Dinner began with careful politeness that gradually warmed into genuine conversation. James, it turned out, shared Clark's love of jazz and Bobby's appreciation for abstract art. He was funny, self-deprecating, and clearly adored Maya. "Remember when we tried to make that souffle?" Maya giggled, looking at James, "and it exploded in the oven." "Your mom's still finding chocolate in strange places." James laughed. "I'm better with hearts than ovens, apparently." As the evening progressed, Clark understood why Bobby had been drawn to this man. James was everything Clark hadn't been: present, stable, emotionally available. The perfect choice for a single mother protecting her heart. After dinner, Maya dragged both men outside for volcano demonstrations while Bobby cleaned up. Through the window, she watched them crouched around Maya's project, James explaining the chemistry while Clark helped measure ingredients. Her daughter's laughter rang through the evening air. "She's lucky," Bobby murmured when James returned to help dry dishes, "to have both of you in her life. She's easy to love." James accepted a plate, his movements efficient. "Like her mother." "James, I need to say this," he interrupted gently. "Not to make things awkward, but to make them clear. I love you, Bobby. Part of me always will. But what you have with Clark, that's the real thing, the kind that reshapes everything. How can you be so sure? We've barely... Because I saw your face that night at the gallery, before you even spoke to him, when you first spotted him across the room. In that moment, I knew I'd been a placeholder. You were never... I was, and it's okay." He smiled, sad but genuine. "I'd rather be a good memory than a lifetime of almosts." Tears blurred Bobby's vision. "You're a better man than either of us deserves." "No, I'm just a man who knows when to step aside and who wants the people he loves to be happy." He glanced toward the yard where Clark was helping Maya reload her volcano. He left everything for her, for both of you. That takes courage or foolishness. "Same thing sometimes." James dried his hands, turning to face her fully. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "Always. Stop punishing yourself for making safe choices. Stop punishing him for leaving when you asked him to. And stop being afraid of what you both clearly want, which is a real chance, a real family, the life you've been painting for 8 years. Before Bobby could respond, Maya burst through the door. "Mama, we made the biggest eruption yet. Daddy added dish soap and it went everywhere. Dr. James says we discovered a new chemical reaction." The casual use of Daddy still caught Bobby off guard, but Maya had adopted it completely within days of their reunion. Now it rolled off her tongue, as naturally as breathing. Clark followed, his shirt splattered with red foam. "Sorry about the mess. Got a bit carried away with the scientific method." "The mark of all great discoverers," James said easily. He checked his watch. "I should head out. Early surgery tomorrow." "But we haven't had dessert," Maya protested. "Next." "Time, princess. Keep working on that volcano. I expect a full report at the science fair." Maya hugged him fiercely. "You'll come? Even though what? Even though you and Mama aren't, together anymore?" James knelt to her level. "Maya, just because things change doesn't mean people stop caring. I'll always be your friend, always be here when you need me." That's what family does. We adjust, we evolve, but we don't disappear. Like atoms, Maya said seriously. They can change form but never stop existing. Exactly like atoms. You really are a scientist. As James left, exchanging handshakes with Clark and a brief hug with Bobby, the house settled into a new configuration. Maya chatted about her project, while Clark helped clean red foam from the porch. Bobby watched them, seeing how naturally they moved together, how Maya unconsciously mirrored Clark's gestures. "Bath time," she announced when the mess was contained. "Can Daddy read me a story after?" "If he wants to." "Always," Clark said immediately. Later, with Maya tucked in and sleeping, Bobby and Clark found themselves on the porch swing, the evening air soft around them. Fireflies blinked in the garden like earthbound stars. "James is a good man," Clark said finally. "He is. Maya loves him. She loves you more. Both of you." He paused. "Thank you for letting me be part of this, for giving me a chance. It's not just for Maya." The admission hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Clark turned to look at her, and Bobby saw in his eyes the same mixture of hope and fear she felt. "I know we said we'd take it slow. We have been. 2 months of family. Dinners and bedtime stories and very careful boundaries. Is that what you want? Careful boundaries?" Bobby considered the question, thinking about James's words, about 8 years of painting the same storm, about the way her heart still thundered when Clark smiled. "No," she said softly. "I don't think I do." He moved closer on the swing, and she didn't pull away. "What do you want?" "To stop being afraid, to stop pretending I haven't been in love with you since the night we met, to see what happens when we stop running from this." "Bobby," she silenced him with a kiss, soft and tentative. At first, then deeper as 8 years of longing melted into the present moment. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "Well," Clark managed, "that was overdue. I was going to say perfect, but overdue works too." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, the swing creaking gently. Inside, their daughter slept, peacefully, dreaming of volcanoes and families, and the way love could reshape itself into new forms without losing its essential power. "I bought the ring 6 months after the storm," Clark said suddenly. Bobby stiffened. "What?" "Not for Victoria, never for her. I bought it because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Carried it with me for years, telling myself I was crazy. It's in my sock drawer now." "Clark, I'm not proposing. Not yet. We need time, need to be sure. But I wanted you to know that even when I tried to move on, some part of me was always waiting too." Bobby leaned into him, feeling the last of her walls crumble. "Maya asked me yesterday if you were going to marry us. What did you tell her?" "That some stories take time to find their endings, that the best ones are worth waiting for." "And are we worth waiting for?" She thought about James's grace, about Maya's joy, about the way Clark had upended his entire life for a daughter he'd just met, about 8 years of painting storms and the unexpected rainbow that followed. "I think we might be the best story of all," she said. Above them, stars emerged one by one, and the night air carried the promise of approaching spring. Inside, their daughter slept in perfect trust that tomorrow would bring more love, more family, more of the life they were building together. They had weathered the storm, survived the separation, found their way back through art and chance and courage. Now came the harder part, the daily choice to stay, to build, to trust in the fragile, beautiful thing growing between them. But sitting there in the darkness with Clark's hand warm in hers, Bobby felt no fear. Only certainty that some storms were meant to circle back, bringing not destruction, but transformation. And this time, they would weather whatever came next together. Chapter 10. Full Circle. 1 year later, thunder rolled across the Mississippi Delta like a lover's growl, dark and full of promise. Clark stood at the altar in Victoria's garden, his body thrumming with anticipation that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. Every nerve ending felt alive, electric, waiting for her. 9 years. 9 years since that night when lightning had struck in more ways than one. 9 years of dreaming about her taste, her scent, the way she'd moved beneath him, and now, finally, she would be his forever. The first drops of rain began to fall as the music swelled, and then, God, there she was. Bobby emerged from the house like a goddess, born from the storm itself. The ivory silk of her dress clung to every curve, the rain beginning to make the fabric translucent. Her dark skin glowed against the pale silk, and her hair, adorned with white orchids, was already starting to curl in the humidity. But it was her eyes that undid him, dark, hungry, promising everything he'd dreamed of for 9 long years. She walked toward him with deliberate slowness, her hips swaying, her gaze never leaving his. The rain intensified with each step, plastering the dress to her body until Clark could see the outline of everything. The curve of her breasts, the dip of her waist, the flare of her hips that had haunted his dreams. When she reached him, her hand found his, and the touch sent lightning through his veins. "I've been wet all day thinking about this moment," she whispered, her voice low and throaty, meant only for him. "About you. About tonight." Clark's control nearly shattered. "Bobby." "Shh." She pressed closer, uncaring of their audience. "I've waited 9 years to be your wife. To have you in my bed every night, to wake up with your hands on my body. I'm done waiting." The minister cleared his throat, but Clark barely heard him begin the ceremony. He was lost in Bobby's eyes, in the way raindrops traced the column of her throat, in the slight parting of her lips that made him remember exactly how she tasted. "The vows," the minister prompted, his voice slightly strained. Clark took both, her hands pulling her closer until they were sharing breath. "Bobby," his voice was rough, raw with 9 years of need. "That night you saved me. You awakened something primal in me. I've spent every night since burning for you. Empty beds, hollow touches, meaningless connections. Nothing could fill the space you left in me." His thumbs stroked her palms, feeling her shiver. "I've dreamed of you 1,000 different ways. Your skin against mine, your voice breaking on my name, the way you looked at me like I was your salvation while you were busy being mine." Bobby's breath hitched, her eyes darkening. "Clark, I'm not finished," he said, his voice dropping. "Lower, I promise to worship your body like the temple it is, to make love to you with the same passion that created our daughter, to spend every night for the rest of our lives making up for the ones we lost." Tears mixed with rain on Bobby's cheeks. When she spoke, her voice was thick with desire. "Clark, you ruined me that night. Ruined me for every other man, every other touch. I've painted storms for 9 years because nothing else captured the wildness you unleashed in me." She stepped impossibly closer, their bodies nearly touching. Every brush stroke was foreplay. Every canvas was a love letter. "I've been making love to your memory for 9 years, aching for the real thing." Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried over the storm. "Tonight, I'm going to show you what 9 years of wanting does to a woman. I'm going to let you do everything you've dreamed of, everything I've dreamed of, until neither of us remembers what it feels like to be apart." "The rings," the minister said weakly. Maya stepped forward with the rings, beaming despite the rain. But Clark only had eyes for Bobby, watching as she slid the ring onto his finger with deliberate slowness. "With this ring," she breathed, "I claim you. Your body, your soul, your passion, all mine." "With this ring," Clark echoed, his hand shaking. Slightly as he placed the band on her finger, "I bind myself to you, to your bed, to your body, to your heart, forever. You may now kiss." But Clark was already pulling her against him, one hand tangled in her wet hair, the other pressed against the small of her back, feeling the heat of her through the wet silk. The kiss was 9 years of starvation ending, desperate, consuming, absolutely inappropriate for public viewing. Bobby melted against him, her mouth opening under his, her tongue meeting his with equal hunger. She pressed closer, uncaring of their audience, and Clark groaned into her mouth when he felt her breasts against his chest. Thunder crashed directly overhead as they kissed, the storm blessing their union. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, pupils dilated with desire. "If I have to wait until tonight, I might die," Clark growled against her ear. "Good things come to those who wait," she murmured back, then bit his earlobe. "And I promise you'll come. Again. And again. And again." The reception passed in a torture of stolen touches and burning glances. During their first dance, Bobby pressed against him indecently close. "Do you remember how we danced that night?" she whispered. "After the first time, when we were both naked and you held me against the wall?" "Jesus, Bobby," he groaned. "I'm going to wear the white lingerie I bought," she continued mercilessly. "The one that's completely sheer. I've been saving it for 9 years, Clark. For you." His hands tightened on her waist. "You're trying to kill me." "No, I'm trying to seduce my husband. Is it working? You know it is." During the speeches, while Marcus threatened Clark with bodily harm if he ever hurt his sister, Bobby's hand found Clark's thigh under the table. Her fingers traced patterns that made him grateful for the tablecloth hiding his reaction. "Remember what you did with your tongue that night," she breathed in his ear. "I want that again. Want to feel you everywhere." "The coat closet," he ground out. "Now." They slipped away separately, but their absence was noted by several knowing smiles. The closet was small, dark, private. Clark pressed Bobby against the door the moment it closed. "I can't wait anymore," he groaned, his hands finally on her body. "Then don't," she gasped, hiking her dress up. "Please, Clark, I need you. Need to feel you inside me again." Their coupling was desperate, 9 years of separation erased in the joining of their bodies. Bobby bit his shoulder to muffle her cries as Clark moved inside her, both of them too far gone for gentleness. "Mine," he growled against her throat. "Say it!" "Yours," she gasped. "Always yours, only yours." They came together, shuddering and gasping, clinging to each other as waves of pleasure crashed over them. When they could breathe again, they smiled at each other in the darkness. "That should hold us until tonight," Bobby said shakily. "Barely," Clark replied, already wanting her again. They returned to the reception separately, trying to look composed. Victoria caught Clark's eye and raised her champagne glass in a knowing toast. As the evening wound down, they prepared to leave for their honeymoon. Maya hugged them both goodbye. "Make me a brother or sister," she commanded cheerfully. "We'll work on it," Clark promised, catching Bobby's heated gaze. In the car, finally alone, Bobby straddled Clark's lap despite her dress. "I've been dying all day," she confessed, kissing his neck. "Wanting you, needing you. The moment I saw you at that altar, I wanted to run to you, tear your clothes off." "The hotel's 20 minutes away," he managed. "Too long." She rocked against him, making them both groan. 9 years was too long. "I need you now." Clark's control snapped. "Driver, take the long way, the scenic route." The privacy partition went up, and Bobby's laugh was wicked. "Scandalous, Mr. Dawson," says the woman straddling me in a wedding dress. She kissed him deeply, her hands working at his belt. "I want our second time as husband and wife to be in a bed. But our first—" "Here," he agreed, helping her with his zipper. "Now! Can't wait!" They came together with shared groans of relief, moving together as the car wound through empty country roads. The storm had passed, leaving the night clear and star-filled, but inside the car, their own storm raged. "I love you," Bobby gasped as she moved above him. "Love you so much. Needed you so badly." "Never again," Clark promised, his hands guiding her hips. "Never another night apart. You're mine now." "Show me," she demanded. "Show me I'm yours." He did, bringing her to the edge again and again until she was begging, then finally letting her fall over, following her into bliss. Later, in their hotel suite, they made love properly, slowly, thoroughly, making up for every lost night. The white lingerie she'd promised lasted approximately 30 seconds before Clark tore it off. "I'll buy you more," he promised, kissing down her body. "Don't care," she gasped. "Just don't stop." They loved through the night, sleeping briefly, only to wake and reach for each other again. 9 years of hunger couldn't be satisfied in one night, but they made a valiant effort. As dawn broke, they lay entwined, finally sated. Bobby traced patterns on Clark's chest, feeling his heartbeat under her fingers. "Was it worth the wait?" she asked softly. Clark pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "You were worth everything. The wait, the pain, the longing. All of it led us here." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "And where's here?" "The beginning," he said. "The real beginning of our forever." "I like the sound of that," she murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "Forever with you." Clark held her close, watching the sun rise on their first day as husband and wife. 9 years ago, a storm had brought them together. Now finally the storm had passed, leaving them in the calm of perfect certainty. They were home,